Hey guys, tonight we journey into a place where the sun paints everything in gold and the wind has memorized 10,000 secrets. Imagine walls so tall they block out the horizon, made not of stone or steel, but of earth layer upon layer of sun-baked mud. This is not a fantasy. This city was real. Once, its towers stood proud in the desert heat, its markets rivaled the bustle of London's alleys, and its rulers sent letters to kings across oceans. You're about to walk through a gate that time forgot. You'll hear stories told in shadows, feel heat in your bones, and maybe begin to wonder what else history has politely swept under the nearest rug. You probably won't survive this. Not because of swords or curses, though there may be a few, but because by the end, your sense of what's lost might never be the same. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know who's wandering this ancient dreamscape with me tonight. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward, feet crunching softly over dried clay, the air hot and still. Before you looms a city wall, not gleaming like marble or spiked like iron, but mottled and warm, built of muddias, actual mud-shaped and stacked with mathematical care. The gatehouse is massive, its arch high enough for a camel caravan to pass without ducking. There's no signage, no neon welcome, just the faint smell of baked earth and distant incense, and a carved wooden door hanging slightly ajar. Step inside. Immediately, the noise wraps around you like a quilt. The shouts of porters, the bray of donkeys, the occasional sharp clang of copper pans being stacked. Your senses hum. Even the air here has flavor, spicy, smoky, alive. Historians still argue whether the city's name was ever recorded consistently. Some say it changed depending on the season, the ruler, or the mood of the local poets. But the one thing no one denies, this place was massive. At its height, it had tens of thousands of inhabitants, and the trade routes that spidered through its gates made it richer than your average medieval duchy. The gates were not just protection, they were a statement, a status update, in mud. Each was adorned with geometric etchings and faded murals that depicted ancestors with improbable beards, serpents that circled the sky, and a few squint-toned fellow who's clearly wearing sunglasses centuries too early. Maybe he was just squinting back. You pass a group of children playing with carved wooden animals in the dust. One offers you a figurine of a lion with two heads. Guardian spirit, she explains solemnly, before darting away when a nearby elder claps for silence. Respect, apparently, is still enforced by hand gestures. Along the main road, sun-dried bricks stretch in patterns that shimmer slightly underfoot. You're told it's an old technique meant to confuse invader sand tourists with weak ankles. The layout feels purposeful, though it lacks the rigid grids of Roman cities or the chaotic swirls of medieval London. Here, streets fold around the city like layers of an onion, each older than the last. Every so often, someone will casually mention that you're walking atop buildings buried long ago, collapsed by time and sealed beneath new construction. It's archaeology meets urban planning with a hint of denial. A stray goat eyes you suspiciously before headbutting a jug of water. No one reacts. The goat is clearly in charge here. To your left, a sloped plaza leads down to a sunken gate. Gate of Salt, according to a nearby storyteller, who pauses mid-narrative to ask if you're carrying anything flammable. You're not sure why that matters, but you make a mental note anyway. Salt caravans once poured through here, shimmering under white cloth awnings, their arrival so profitable that the city declared public holidays in their honor. One ruler even wrote a love poem to a particularly fine slab of crystallized sodium chloride. The poem did not survive. The salt, reportedly, did. Just past the salt gate, there's an ancient fig tree whose gnarled roots have cracked the stones around it. A few elders sit beneath its shade, drinking something thick and minty out of carved gourds. One gives you a nod, the kind of nod that implies you've already been judged, measured, and assigned a mildly approving grade. Farther ahead, the skyline begins to rise. Yes, a skyline mud towers, some 3 or 4 stories high, capped with flat roofs and wooden beams jutting like eyelashes. It's oddly modern looking, in a Flintstones meets Camel Caravan way. You wonder how it hasn't all just melted. And the answer is, it does, every year. That's the trick. See, this city isn't built to last. It's built to be repaired. The walls are patched, redone, smoothed over again and again like a living thing shedding old skin. Inhabitants slap new layers of clay onto the old like frosting on a layer cake, preserving history with every swipe. One scholar called it architecture as amnesia. Another just called it really squishy when it rains. Speaking of rain, there's none tonight. Just that dry, unshakable heat and a sky going lavender as evening approaches. You find yourself drawn to the rooftops where the breeze carries whispers and the scent of cardamom. Up there, you can see the full shape of the city, a sprawl of warm browns and golden light, each home glowing like a lantern. You sit at the edge of one roof. A pigeon lands beside you with something shiny in its beak. It drops it a bit of glazed pottery and flies off. You pick it up. It's a fragment of a story, one of thousands. This city is made of mud, yes, but also of memory. You descend from the rooftop just as the evening deepens, the dusty air cooling by a few blessed degrees. Lanterns begin to glow softly shaded in fabric, dangling from poles, and some tucked into wall niches like fireflies that took a vow of interior design. You follow the crowd as they surge toward the heartbeat of the city, the marketplace. The noise hits before the smell does, but only barely. Shouts bounce between walls and languages you half recognize. Somewhere, a flute trills with surprising sass. And then it hits waves of cumin, crushed dates, roasted lamb, something that might be honey but also could be fermented yak milk. It's hard to say, and no one's offering labels. You step into a plaza, ringed by stalls that somehow feel both ancient and aggressively festive. Fabrics ripple overhead in saffron, indigo, and teal, stretched between poles like banners in a very cozy war. Beneath them, merchants preside over piles of dried fruits, pyramids of spices, and stacks of pottery so fragile-looking you break into a nervous sweat just walking past. A man offers you a pomegranate the size of your head. Another tries to sell you a holy pebble. One particularly aggressive child waves a painted gourd at you and says it cures memory loss, then immediately forgets he offered it to you and tries again 10 seconds later. Historians still argue whether the market functioned year-round or swelled seasonally with the arrival of trade caravans. What's clear is that this was the city's lifeblood, its rhythm, its gossip mill, its economic engine, and quite possibly its comedy club. The vendors are relentless, yes, but they're also hilarious. One man selling almonds insists they were blessed by a saint who once sneezed so hard he summoned rain. Another offers you royal-grade onion, as if that's a recognized international standard. A parrot, clearly fed up with the noise, squawks from its perch beside a jewelry stand. Overpriced, it shrieks, then starts humming what might be an off-key lullaby. The merchant glares at it. Ignore him. He used to belong to a diplomat. The jewelry stall is hard to ignore, though. It glitters like someone spilled a treasure. Chest copper, amber, glass beads, the occasional glint of what might be actual gold. Necklaces made from shells not found within hundreds of miles hint at far-reaching connections. You imagine the hands that traded these Berber, Arab, West African, maybe even someone who spoke French before it was fashionable. You pass a line of women haggling expertly over saffron bundles, their robes gathered in elaborate knots that signal everything from marital status to preferred camel route. One pauses mid-bargain to adjust her henna'd veil and offers you a suspiciously nice smile, like she knows something you don't. Maybe she does. Beneath your feet, the ground is stamped clay, covered in woven reed mats that feel slightly springy, like the city is breathing under you. Somewhere in the crowd, someone's frying something that smells like heaven and sounds like it's sizzling in holy oil. You follow your nose. A food stall looms a wide flat pan set over glowing coals, with something golden crisping in it. Camel fritter? The vendor asks. You hesitate, he winks. Don't worry, just a little camel. You eat it. It's surprisingly good. Probably not legal where you live, but who's checking? Here's your mainstream historical fact. This city was a node in the trans-Saharan trade routes, which stretched across the vast desert like a web of gold, salt, ivory, and ideas. The market wasn't just about stuff, it was about stories, alliances, marriage negotiations, and deeply confusing card games that no outsider ever really learned. A fringe theory claims that the market also doubled as a listening post for a loose collective of market spies, older women who sat quietly behind pottery stands, collecting gossip like coin. They supposedly advised rulers, brokered deals, and this part's Shakyan stopped an entire coup with a badly aimed ladle. Listen, I don't make the rules. A boy tugs your sleeve. His face is painted with what looks like charcoal and crushed hibiscus. You look lost, he says solemnly. You need the one-eyed merchant. Before you can ask what that means, he's vanished behind a curtain of drying fish. You drift past storytellers seated on folding carpets, their hands weaving tales in the orange light. One recites a poem to a cluster of listeners sipping from shared cups. It's about a prince who fell in love with the moon and tried to marry it by building a mud tower so tall it scraped the stars. Spoiler, it didn't work out. But the poem ends with a joke about goats, so the crowd laughs anyway. Somewhere nearby, a woman is selling carved bone flutes. You pick one up. It's warm from the sun and marked with patterns that feel oddly familiar. Play it, she says, then immediately bursts out laughing. Just kidding. That one summons rain. Or rats. We're still figuring it out. You take a breath and step back to watch the marketplace from a distance. It pulses with light and shadow, voices rising and falling like ocean waves. The city feels endless, its energy, its absurdity, its layered complexity. You find a quiet bench made of mud brick and sit for a moment, wiping spice dust off your hands. Above you, the sky has shifted again from lavender to velvet blue. Stars emerge like shy guests at a party. And still, the market hums. The parrot sings again. The camel vendor laughs at his own joke. Someone argues about the price of figs with a woman who insists she once dated a prince. You don't know if that's true, but in this city of mud and memory, it just might be. By the time you leave the marketplace, your ears are ringing with music, laughter, and about 7 different sales pitches still echoing in your head. You're not entirely sure whether you actually bought a dried lizard or just admired it too enthusiastically. Either way, it's in your pocket now, and you're strangely comforted by that. The streets grow quieter as you head northward. away from the bustle and into the residential quarters neighborhoods built not for show, but for shade, survival, and social hierarchy. Here, the mud walls rise closer together, casting the narrow lanes into a cozy gloom. Bright blue doors punctuate the brown like beads on a woven bracelet. Some are painted with symbols: hands, eyes, spiral charms against bad luck, or nosy neighbors. Probably both. You duck under a low archway, and the temperature drops instantly. Welcome to the heart of the domestic maze. This is where families live, love, squabble, and cook meals that waft smells out into the alleys so rich you consider knocking on random doors. The design is genius, really. Inward-facing homes with central courtyards that shield from sand, wind, and the occasional enthusiastic cousin. One courtyard is open and alive with the sound of grinding two women working a massive stone quern, their arms a rhythmic blur. Nearby, a child feeds a goat what appears to be a page from a very old manuscript. The goat seems cultured. A teenager lounges in the shade, reading a scroll and pretending not to notice you. Classic teenager behavior, ancient or not. Historians still argue whether these residential blocks were planned in advance or grew organically over centuries of improvisation in clay. What's certain is that the architecture creates microclimates, cool air trapped below, warm roofs above, and staircases that wind like snakes around the perimeter. You start to notice that no house is quite like its neighbor. Every wall leans a little differently. Every door creaks with its own tune. It's like the city itself has opinions. A woman leans from an upper window, tossing a rope basket down to someone on the street below. They exchange goods dates, flatbread, gossip. It's a vertical economy, and it's thriving. You realize this is how information spreads here, not through newspapers or public decrees, but through soft voices drifting across balconies and hands brushing in passing. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In many Sahelian cities especially, this one architecture evolved to match not just climate, but culture. Buildings weren't just homes, they were social scripts. High walls preserved modesty, open rooftops encouraged nighttime gatherings, and layered entrances confused anyone who wasn't supposed to be there, including you. You've been slightly lost for 20 minutes now, but the locals are too polite to say anything. A fringe theory suggests that some houses had listening holes, tiny openings placed at ear level, so you could eavesdrop discreetly from inside without being seen. Your inner teenager is thrilled. Your adult self is mildly concerned. You round a corner and find a mural faded but unmistakably detailed. It shows a woman weaving, a tree sprouting from her loom, and birds flying out of the branches. It's beautiful. It's also about 12 feet tall and completely out of place in this modest lane. A young man notices your gaze. My great-great-grandmother painted that, he says. Then pauses. Or maybe it was a prophecy. We're still arguing. A few steps later, you find a communal oven. The brick dome still warm, its edges blackened with generations of use. A line of flatbreads cool nearby under a cloth. No one's watching, but you resist temptation barely. The smell is an entire mood. You peek into a small doorway and catch a glimpse of an interior room. It's dim and quiet, lit only by a single oil lamp. Niches in the walls hold carved wooden bowls and ceramic jugs. A rug hangs over one entrance, its patterns too precise to be casual. You blink. Is that a pattern of stars? A constellation map? Someone here knew things, maybe still does. You emerge onto a wider lane just as a group of children barrel past, chasing a hoop with a stick, laughing so hard they don't notice you've been swept into their game. You run with them for a moment, before ducking out with your dignity mostly intact. The hoop continues down the road, defying physics and probably several city bylaws. At the end of the street is a public well, shaded by a canopy of woven reeds. A few women draw water, chatting in low voices. One notices you and smiles. "Thirsty?" she asks, then offers you a scoop in a hollowed gourd. You accept, and the water is startlingly cold sharp, clean, almost sweet. It tastes like secrets kept cool underground. Here's something odd. Despite the desert climate, this city managed water beautifully. Cisterns, underground canals, and sacred wells like this one made survival not just possible, but graceful. In fact, some scholars believe the city's mastery of water is what let it grow beyond its rivals. Others insist it was sheer luck. Still others say, water spirits. Always a classic. You follow a wall covered in hand-printed ones, big ones, some overlapping, all pressed into the wet clay long ago and preserved like a family tree in tactile form. It feels like they're still here, these people, watching, laughing, possibly judging your shoes. Eventually, you reach the edge of the residential district, where the buildings widen and begin to space out. You can see rooftops again, the city's rhythm softening as it stretches toward the edge. And then, just beyond the last doorway, a Gardena, real one. Lush and green, with rows of date palms, beans, and herbs, chickens shuffle around like they own the place. You're told this is one of several family plots maintained through communal labor and an ancient agreement that no one seems to have written down, but everyone remembers, miraculously. A teenage girl waters the plants using a goatskin bag tied with dyed string. She waves, you wave back. For a moment, you could swear you belong here, just for a heartbeat. The sun has dipped below the walls now, casting everything in that blue-pink hour between chaos and sleep. Somewhere behind you, a drum begins to pulse, low and steady. You're starting to understand this city, not just how it worked, but how it felt, like home, but made of earth. You wake not literally, but it feels like you do as the drumbeat thickens. You're in the scholarly quarter now, where the city stops whispering and starts reciting. The alleys stretch straighter here, the air weighted with dust, ink, and a seriousness that tastes vaguely of dried figs and footnotes. This is where the books live. You pass a mud brick arch that frames a carved wooden dorrits, lintel etched with patterns so tight they seem to hum. An elderly man sits on a mat beside it, transcribing from one scroll to another. His pen is a sharpened reed, his inkwell tucked into the crook of a clay dish. You hear the scratch of thought turning into permanence. "Want to see something ancient?" he asks, without looking up. You hesitate. Then he lifts the scroll just enough for you to see the illuminated margin-inked gazelles leaping through vines. "This was copied in the time of the Songhai," he says, "or by someone who lied very convincingly." You're in the intellectual engine of the city now libraries, not of stone and silence, but of layered mudrooms, cool and dry and humming with knowledge. This isn't your average public library with late fees and passive-aggressive signage. This is a living labyrinth of scholarship. Men and women pass you carrying scrolls wrapped in dyed cloth. Young apprentices dart between rooms, balancing inkpots like offerings to a papery god. Here's your mainstream historical fact. This city housed one of the greatest manuscript collections in medieval Africans of thousands of documents on law, astronomy, medicine, poetry, and philosophy. The texts were often written in Arabic, but many were infused with local idioms and ideas. Some are still being translated today. stored in family trunks and attics, hidden during invasions, passed down like recipes that can summon the moon. One building looms taller than the rest. Its walls are smoother, almost polished, and an intricate frieze runs along the base. You duck through its shaded entrance and enter a room that smells of sandalwood, beeswax, and very old ideas. Shelves line the walls, stacked high with bundled manuscripts, some tied in goatskin, others layered between thin wood covers painted in cobalt and ochre. A group of scholars sits in a circle, engaged in quiet debate. One quotes the Greek philosophers, another counters with a Berber proverb. A third raises a palm and says, "But what if the moon affects the heart more than the tides?" You can't tell if it's a metaphor or actual astronomy. Maybe both. Historians still argue whether this scholarly culture was strictly Islamic, hybridized with local mysticism, or something else entirely. The truth is probably all of the above, depending on which manuscript you're reading and who wrote it and who copied it, and whether they were having a particularly poetic day. A fringe theory claims that among these dusty scrolls is one that predicts not just eclipses, but specific visitors from other lands, described in such eerie detail that modern researchers get goosebumps. You try not to take that personally. A young boy approaches you, cradling a slim volume wrapped in embroidered cloth. He doesn't speak, but hands it to you gently. You unwrap it and see a page glowing faintly with shell gold leaf. The words Danseno literally, but almost. You read, "He who forgets the weight of ink shall be ruled by those who do not write." Chills. You're not sure if it's the breeze or the meaning. You walk through a side corridor where thin windows slice the light into clean lines on the floor. A wooden box contains styluses, polished stones for smoothing paper, and odd objects, what looks like a fragment of bone carved with stars, and a spool of red thread. You don't ask. Some knowledge waits for you to be ready. You overhear a conversation in a courtyard, two scholars debating whether a comet observed decades ago was a harbinger of drought or just a really fast rock. They laugh, then fall quiet. You get the sense that here, knowledge is both a game and a responsibility one you carry like a water jar balanced on your head. It takes training and very strong neck muscles. Upstairs, on a wide terrace, you find more students gathered under a fabric canopy. One teaches another to read aloud in rhythm, like a chant. The words form a slow drumbeat, echoing the pulse you heard earlier. It's not just about comprehension, it's about tempo, repetition, breath. You realize that in this city, reading isn't just a mental act, it's a performance, a devotion. Down the street, a teacher rings a brass bell. His students appear like desert spirits, some barefoot, some scribbling as they walk. He smiles at you. Knowledge here, he says, is like date wine. It ferments and it kicks. You leave the quarter with your mind buzzing. There's something holy about this place, but not in the usual way. No one bows to the scrolls. They argue with them, laugh at them, rewrite them. It's messy and brilliant. Before you turn the corner, you glance back and see the librarian from earlier now dozing beside his ink dish, a cat curled up on his lap. The cat yawns, possibly in Arabic. And as you walk on, past a group of children playing with letter blocks carved from clay, you realize the most astonishing thing isn't that the city was literate. It's that it expected you to be, too. You barely notice the shift as the city tilts once again, trading parchment for pigments, scrolls for rhythms. The alleys swell with color saffron fabrics hanging from lattices, strings of glass beads swaying in doorways, bowls of crushed ochre lined up on ledges like offerings to some elemental god of artistry. This is the artisans' district, where nothing stays quiet for long. A man with henna-stained hands whistles through his teeth as he chisels patterns into a wooden panel. You watch as curlicues bloom beneath his fingers, perfectly symmetrical, utterly improvised. He doesn't pause, doesn't sketch. He's done this 1,000 times, and each time it's new. Welcome to the pulsing, messy, stubbornly alive heart of the city's creative engine. If the scholars were the memory, these folks are the nerve, ending sensitive, reactive, constantly rebuilding the body. Here, crafts aren't hobbies. They're identities passed from calloused hand to calloused hand. A young woman dips thread into a dye pot the size of a laundry basin. Steam swirls up, heavy with crushed pomegranate, indigo leaf, and something that smells suspiciously like onion skin. The threads come out glistening with color so deep it could stain your dreams. Mainstream fact break. This city wasn't just intellectually rich, it was an economic marvel of artisan goods. From dyed fabrics and tooled leather to silver amulets and engraved calabashes, goods from here traveled hundreds of miles across the Sahara, carried by camel caravans like letters written in pigment and sweat. You pause at a stall lined with hand mirrors framed in bone and shell. One reflects your face a little too clearly. You look away before it tells you something you weren't ready to hear. Around the corner, music begins. Not the soft, scholarly flute of the library district. This is full-on drumming, ankle bells, and clapping that comes from the soles of the feet. A celebration, maybe. Or just Tuesday. You follow the sound and stumble into an open courtyard where dancers twirl in the dust. Their robes flare out like painted birds. Jewelry sings with every stomp. A girl grabs your hand, pulls you into the circle. You try to follow the steps left, stamp, right, clap it. Your rhythm is more confused camel than desert gazelle. Still, no one laughs. You're in the circle now. That's what matters. Scholars still argue whether these dances were ritual, social, or performance, but the truth is probably yes, all three. There's something in the way the oldest dancer moves slow, grounded, precise, that makes you think he's not just dancing for the city, but as the city. Someone hands you a carved gourd filled with tamarind drink. It's sharp, sweet, and fizzes a little at the back of your tongue. You drink deeply, trying not to think about your tragic performance. The woman beside you smiles. You dance like someone who's never danced. Fair. A fringe tidbit floats your way. Some oral histories claim the city once had a secret guild of mask makers who carved ancestral spirits into wood and wore them only during eclipses. The masks were said to sing. Not metaphorically, actually sing. No one's found one that still works, but that hasn't stopped the stories. You pass a workshop where a father and son shape clay into oil lamps. They work in silence, feet pressing the wheel, hands wet with slip. The lamps are decorated with swirling motifs waves, vines, eyes. You ask what the symbols mean. The father shrugs. Protection. Light. Same thing. A few doors down, two women weave side by side on ground looms. The rhythm of their shuttles is hypnotic. You notice the fabric's edge curls slightly like it's shy. You wonder how many of these crafts were created to be touched, worn, used, and how many were meant to be buried, saved for some unknown afterward. You peek into a dye house and are hit with color so dense it practically has weight. Skeins of wool hang from ceiling beams like sleeping birds, dripping hues that don't exist in your normal palette. There's a smell of vinegar, earth, and fire. This is where beauty gets boiled alive. Outside, children trace patterns in dust with sticks, mimicking the elaborate symbols etched into a nearby pot. One looks up at you and says, "This one's for water. This one's for the moon. This one keeps nightmares away." She draws it carefully, then brushes it out with her foot. "Only works once," she whispers. You pass a jewelry maker stringing beads onto thread so fine it's practically breath. The beads aren't uniform. Some are stone, others shell, a few melted from old glass. A fusion of desert, river, and trade. She nods at your wrist. "You want one?" You decline. But she ties one around your wrist anyway. Now you belong. A few alleys over. Someone's painting. Not a canvasa wall. A massive, rough-textured mural showing a caravan winding through dunes, led by a woman in blue robes with a crescent moon on her brow. The artist steps back, thumb smudged with red ochre. "She's real," he says. Or she was. Or she will be. Time's flexible here. You finally reach a plaza where goods are stacked for transport crates of leather sandals, jars of scented oil, folded fabrics wrapped in palm leaves. Two camels chew lazily in the shade, their humps slightly lopsided from rest. A man counts bundles on an abacus while another seals them with wax. Commerce, like rhythm, is everywhere. Before you leave, you glance back at the artisan quarter, where music still rises and pigments still dry on racks like prayers waiting for wind. It's messy, it's loud, it's real. And as you look down at the beaded thread on your wrist, you realize something unsettling. This wasn't a visit. This was an initiation. You're still trailing traces of pigment in your footprints when the city bends again. This time, it softens. The sounds hush, the heat mellows, and the buildings stretch out into broader courtyards and earthen walls laced with creeping vines. You've arrived at the gardens, the quiet lungs of this place, where trade and thought give way to shade, silence, and slow-growing things. It feels like entering a whispered conversation. Trees with silver-gray bark lean overhead, their leaves trembling as if remembering something they aren't supposed to say out loud. The air smells of fig, basil, and loamy secrets. An old woman sits beneath a date palm, slicing roots into a wooden bowl. She doesn't look up, just says, "You need water," and less questions. Then she hands you a cup of something steeped in mint and bitter bark. You drink. It tastes like medicine or maybe memory. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Many medieval Saharan cities developed sophisticated irrigation and gardening systems, using underground channels called fagaras to draw water from deep aquifers. These gardens weren't just for beauty, they were survival, status, and sometimes symbols of spiritual alignment. In this city, gardens were layered like meaning public, private, medicinal, ritual. You wander through one shaped in geometric rows, onions, mustard greens, desert spinach. A boy waters them with a narrow-spouted clay jug, his sandals muddy, his eyes watchful. "Don't step on the shadows," he warns. They remember. A scholar once wrote that the garden was the most precise metaphor for the soul. It must be tilled, watered, pruned, and protected. You wonder what yours would look like. Probably something between a cactus and an overwatered fern. Under a trellis of climbing gourds, you find a group of women grinding dried hibiscus petals into powder. They pause to greet you, then return to their work, humming a tune that has no beginning. One of them is blind, but her fingers work fastest. Her pile is the brightest red. A fringed tail floats toward you like pollen. It's said there was once a grove hidden beneath the city where the trees bore fruit that could induce visions of ancestors, of cities submerged in sand, of conversations not yet spoken. The fruit had to be eaten under moonlight, and only once. Nearby, a healer prepares poultices from boiled bark and honey. She gestures for you to sit. She paints something onto your temples with her thumb-a-cool streak that smells like pine smoke. "Now you'll dream more gently," she says. or more loudly? Depends what's inside. Historians still argue whether these medicinal gardens were scientifically sophisticated or more symbolic and ritualistic. But the truth, again, may be both. One root heals wounds. Another binds spells. And who's to say which came first? You wander into a grove of twisted olive trees, their trunks gnarled like clenched fists. Beneath one lies a broken stone slab carved with symbols. You can only make out one, a spiral. You touch it. Nothing happens, but your breath slows. The shadows deepen. In a walled corner of the garden, you find what seems like a shrine. No idol, no inscription, just a ring of stones, a feather, and a bowl of water still rippling from some unseen touch. A man walks past, sees you, and simply says, "Offerings for what we don't name." You hear bees, not just one or two, but a low golden hum of a whole apiary. You follow it to a row of clay hives shaped like miniature towers. A woman in blue adjusts the cover of one, unbothered by the swarm around her. "They like poetry," she tells you, placing a slip of paper beneath a hive. It keeps them calm. You try to read it, but she stops you. It's not for you. It's for them. Children race by with baskets of herbs. One trips and spills dried lavender, which blooms across the path in a cloud of purple. He laughs. "The path smells like my grandma now," the others groan. "Your grandma smells like goat." Even here, life is loud. At the edge of the garden district, you find a rectangular pond surrounded by white flowers. Its water is still as breath held in ceremony. A woman floats small wooden lanterns onto the surface. Each bears a single word etched into it. You recognize none of them, but one glows faintly. She leans over and whispers. They're prayers, not requests, just reminders. As the sun begins to lower, everything takes on a honeyed tone. The trees stretch longer shadows. The scent of jasmine drapes itself across the paths. You sit on a worn bench beneath a fig tree and let the silence press gently into your skin. The garden, you realize, isn't for walking through. It's for pausing in, for letting time dilute like tea until it's just warm enough to drink. A breeze carries the scent of cumin and something woodsy, maybe cedar. You hear distant drumming again, but this time it's muffled, as though the earth itself were tapping a pulse to keep things growing. And as you stand to leave, brushing a dried petal from your sleeve, you realize this city doesn't just preserve its past in books or bricks. It grows it, roots it, waters it with sweat and song and superstition. And in that moment, you wonder quietly, reverently what's been planted inside you. You leave the garden behind with dust on your sandals and petals in your thoughts, only to be met by a shift in mood, a hush, not of peace, but of waiting. The streets grow wider, walls rise taller, and overhead, flags of deep crimson and indigo flap from turrets in a slow, ceremonial rhythm. You've arrived at the civic core, the palace quarter. Not palace like glittering fairy tale. Noth, this one's all earth tones and authority. Built from pressed mud brick and burnished clay, it's less concerned with impressing and more with enduring. Thick walls, narrow entrances, watchful slits where eyes might wait, centuries deep. You approach the gates flanked by sentinels in russet robes, spears grounded, expressions unreadable. One of them nods, almost imperceptibly, and you're ushered inside. The main courtyard opens like a declaration. Paved in flat stones, swept spotless, it holds nothing frivolous. Just a central tree brittle, and a long bench where 3 elders sit beneath a slatted awning, watching. Mainstream historical fact incoming. The city was governed by a council of nobles, merchants, and religious scholars, each with specific spheres of influence. Decisions were debated in open forums, with legal codes often recited aloud to prevent creative interpretation. A younger man scribed by the ink under his nails kneels before the elders reading from a scroll. His voice is steady, but sweat traces down his temple. This isn't performance. This is accountability. You listen. It's a dispute about a caravan shipment gone missing somewhere in the dunes. The merchant blames the guards. The guards blame sand demons. The elders don't blink. One finally speaks. Sand demons take what isn't protected. So whose protection failed? A question and a verdict, all in one. You're ushered further in, where hallways branch like the veins of a leaf. Each leads to a different chamber treasury, archive, council, kitchens, which, despite being tucked behind stone doors, somehow still smell of cumin and ash. You peek into the map room. Clay tiles marked with trade routes rest on low tables. Thin slivers of turquoise indicate oases. Red beads note danger. A boy adjusts one bead an inch west. No one stops him. Cartography here is alive. Memory updated daily. Historians still argue whether this palace acted more as a ceremonial seat or a fully administrative machine, but the truth lies in its where. These halls aren't staged. They're lived, stepped on, petitioned through. You step into a side corridor lit by slanted shafts of sun. Along its walls, inscriptions, writings in languages layered like sediment: Arabic, Tamashek, Songhai, Hebrew. Some of it is legal, some poetic, some simply names. Written not for power, but to say, we were here. A fringe story emerges here, half whispered through generations. They say one ruler kept a secret garden, not of plants, but of voices. Buried jars sealed with wax, each containing the last breath of a storyteller. At night, he'd unstopper one and let their tales swirl through his halls like smoke. In one upper room, you find the musicians not entertainers, but ceremonial keepers of rhythm. A woman plays a kora, its strings shining like sunlit spiderwebs. Another hums into a clay flute shaped like a bird. Their music isn't meant for crowds, it's meant for time, to keep it tethered to memory. You sit a while. Let the sound root into your ribs. It vibrates softly like the echo of something important you once forgot. Then you're shown the vault. Not gold, not jewels, but books, scrolls, palm leaf manuscripts wrapped in cloth. One guard carries them with a reverence usually reserved for newborns or relics. Knowledge weighs more than water, he mutters. You lift one. The script, dance-slanted, coiled, deliberate. Margins filled with commentary, notes from scholars long gone, ink faded to cinnamon. You imagine them writing by candlelight, arguing with ghosts of thinkers they never met. In the next chamber, stone benches face an elevated seat carved with geometric patterns. A judge's platform. Here, disputes were heard aloud. You run a hand over the wood. It's worn smooth by elbows, by time, by the weight of decisions. A boy is sweeping the floor. He glances at you. Sometimes people come back and ask if their ruling still stands, he says. Like time will change the answer. Then he sweeps right over a line of sunlight like it never mattered. The palace kitchen, a sensory punch to the face. Roasting grains, honeyed nuts, grilled lamb with cloves. A cook grins at you, hands you a parcel wrapped in leaf. Eat. You'll need salt for where you're going. You bite. It's smoky, sweet, and practically evaporates. You're not sure what it was. It's better that way. You emerge into a side courtyard where two scribes argue over the phrasing of a new civic edict. If we say must, we bind them. If we say may, they ignore it. They both sigh. We should have been potters. As the light shifts, banners are lowered. A drum sounds once, then again. You realize the court is closing for the day. Civic business halts at dusk. What isn't decided by then waits for another sun. As you exit through the western gate, a man offers you a folded piece of paper. Inside, a quote. "The city governs us because we allow it, and because it remembers when we didn't." And as you step outside those towering clay walls, that line chases you down the street like a shadow. The city remembers, even when you wish it wouldn't. You follow the road downhill, away from the palace and its echoing halls, toward the part of the city where memory feels more informal. Here, things don't get carved into stone, they get shouted over tea. Welcome to the markets. No fanfare, no gates. The change is sudden. One corner, you're alone with your thoughts. The next, you're dodging a donkey hauling dates, while a kid with a monkey tries to sell you a love charm. And just like that, you're inside a riddle made of spices, smoke, and clamor. The market is organized chaos. Not the tidy rows you might expect, but something more fluid. Merchants shift stalls based on the wind, the sun, the mood of the day. This morning, the leatherworkers were by the north wall. Now they're clustered under a sycamore tree, arguing about dye prices and goat quality. You're hit with a barrage of scent. Cumin, tamarind, dried fish, sharp lime, sweat. Your nose stages a coup and temporarily shuts down in protest. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Trans-Saharan trade routes once made this city one of the most important commercial hubs in the medieval world. Gold, salt, slaves, ivory, manuscripts, even ostrich feathers passed through here, moving north, south, east, west. A vendor in saffron robes waves you over. He sells historically accurate amulets which he insists are blessed by 7 generations of librarians. You buy one shaped like a lizard with human eyes. He throws in a second one for free, in case the first is cursed. Quirky tidbit for you. In some merchant circles, it was common to seal deals with a spit handshake while reciting part of a poem. If either party misquoted the verse, the deal was void. Business and literature, a surprisingly strict marriage. You pass a copper seller engraving a basin. He hums something familiar, and you realize it's the same melody the bee woman in the garden was humming. Different verse, same song. Textiles spill like waterfalls from open booths. Indigo-dyed cloth, sun-faded silks, woven mats from river reeds. One girl wraps a headscarf around your shoulders before you can object. "Now, you look less roastable," she says. The sun likes pale tourists. Historians still argue whether markets in these cities were gender-divided or more fluid. Some evidence suggests women ran many stalls, especially in food and textiles, while others claim only elite men held trading rights. But here, in this moment, a barefoot grandma is driving a hard bargain over cinnamon, and no one dares argue. A group of children play a game with clay marbles in a dusty alley. One of them looks up and asks, "Are you buying or just walking weird?" You say you're just walking. He shrugs. "Fair. My uncle does that too." You pass a bookstall tucked between 2 stalls selling sheep intestines and dried apricots. Odd placement, but it works. The books are bound in goatskin, titles written in ink so dark it still gleams. A customer asks for a volume on dream interpretation. The seller replies, "Only if you promise not to misuse it." The buyer nods. They both laugh, like that's the oldest joke in the city. You grab a drink from a vendor with 6 pitchers and no labels. He gives you the green one. It tastes like date syrup and regret butt in a good way. Then you find yourself in a quieter corner, the old barter zone. No coins, just trade. A man offers a sack of millet in exchange for repairs to a broken flute. A woman with one eye is weighing 3 duck eggs against a bolt of rough linen. Fair enough. You listen to a group of elders playing a board game on a painted cloth. One of them says, "The trick to trade is knowing when not to sell." The others grunt in agreement. Then one loses and throws the cloth into the air. "You all cheat," he declares, but he's laughing. A man in teal robes tells you a secret. Salt was once so valuable here, it was stacked like bricks to build walls for real. He raises an eyebrow. Course, the walls didn't last long when it rained. You glance up. Not a cloud in sight. You catch a scent that cuts through the noise of smoke and sugar. A baker is flipping flatbreads over coals, pressing them with a metal disc etched with a sun symbol. He hands you one fresh off the fire. "Eat while you walk," he says, "or walk while you eat. Doesn't matter." Further along, an alley lined with apothecaries. Jars of powdered resin, desiccated frogs, crushed glass beetle. A healer with inked palms holds up a vial and says, "This will make you remember things you haven't lived." You back away slowly. "Wise," she mutters. "Not everyone wants to meet their past lives at once." Another fringe tale finds you here, wrapped in a trader's whisper. A stolen manuscript from a lost empire occasionally resurfaces at the market, wrapped in goat fat and salt. It's written in no known script, but those who touch it claim it sings. No one agrees on the tune. By sunset, the market softens. Smoke from cooking fires curls above the rooftops. Drums begin to echo, not loud, just enough to keep time while shadows stretch and merchants pack their wares. A boy selling roasted locusts tosses one your way. "Catch!" You do, barely. You try it. Crunchy, nutty, not bad. He beams like he just converted you to a secret religion. As you walk away, the sounds fade into a kind of low, golden murmur, the afterglow of commerce. The way a city exhales after a full day of bargaining, haggling, and half-joking threats. You step back into the alley that leads away from the market and glance behind. For a moment, you swear the stalls blur shift like they're being folded away, tucked into memory. Or maybe it's the heat playing tricks. Either way, the city doesn't wait. It never has. And there's still more to see. The alley curves gently and leads you deeper, into the hush that follows noise. It's the kind of quiet that wraps around you, like a cool scarf dipped in dusk. The walls here grow higher, closer, plastered in a patchwork of mud and faded pigment. You've entered the Scholar's Quarter. No market here, no bells. Just the soft shuffle of sandals on clay, the turning of pages, and the occasional sneeze from too much dust and not enough breeze. You pass a doorway where an old man sits on a low stool, mending the spine of a book with thread the color of rust. He doesn't look up, just says, "If you're lost, follow the sound of arguing." You do. It takes you to a modest courtyard, half hidden behind a fig tree's on dapples the ground. And yes, there they are, a trio of scholars deep in disagreement. One, wrapped in deep teal with an ink-stained turban, declares that history is shaped by trade routes alone. Another in russet robes insists it's all religion. The third, younger, merely sighs. You're both wrong. It's stories. Always stories. Mainstream historical fact. This city once boasted one of the greatest manuscript traditions of the medieval world, with libraries that rivaled those in Fez, Cairo, and even Cordoba. Its scholars preserved ancient texts, translated foreign works, and created original philosophy, legal commentary, astronomy, and medicine, much of it handwritten in Arabic, Ajami, or Berber script. You're led into one such library. It's not grand, but it breathes. Scrolls and codices line the walls, wrapped in cloth, shelved in niches. The scent here is unmistakable old paper, sandalwood, and time. A student unrolls a scroll with care. You lean in. The calligraphy dances like it's alive. Margins are annotated with debates, doodles, even a small drawing of a donkey in spectacles. That, the student says, was Master Harun's way of marking a bad argument. You ask how old the scroll is? She shrugs. 1,000 years, give or take. The donkey's probably older. Quirky tidbit. Some scholars here refuse to write in straight lines. Instead, they spiraled the text from the center of the page outward. They said it helped the mind follow thought without interruption. Modern archivists say it causes migraines. Tomato, tomato. You're handed a codex heavier than it looks. Its cover is cracked, the script tight. It's a medical treatise on the treatment of melancholy using spices, song, and prayer. There's a whole section devoted to smells. Clove for sorrow, myrrh for guilt, burned dried lemon for lingering shame. Historians still argue whether this literary culture was widespread or confined to elite families. Some suggest reading was a social event, with manuscripts passed around like gossip. Others claim strict guardianship, only a chosen few could access certain texts. But in this room, a toddler is chewing on a corner of a poetry book, so you figure it's at least somewhat casual. Outside, a chalkboard is propped against the wall. A riddle is scrawled across it. I have no breath, yet whisper. I hold no weight, yet shape empires. I am not eaten, yet feed all. What am I? A boy nearby winks at you. Don't say scroll, that's too easy. The scholar's district pulses with quiet routines. A woman in indigo adjusts stacks of palm leaf texts beneath a sunshade. A young man balances a jug of water atop 3 rolled manuscripts. Nobody panics. Further along, you find a study chamber open to the sky, with curved benches and a wall-etched sundial. Students sit at angles, trying to stay in the shadow. A man teaches them by asking questions. Why do we read? One answers, to argue with the dead. Another, to keep forgetting things in smarter ways. You peek into an adjacent room where stars are drawn on the ceiling in crushed lapis. An astronomy student adjusts a clay astrolabe. They say the stars are like footnotes, she murmurs. You look up to find where you are below. Another scholar shows you a fragile volume of poetry, each verse starting with a different letter of the alphabet. He reads you a line. Beneath my feet are cities you will never find, and within my chest are maps I dare not share. He smiles. He wrote that after his 3rd failed marriage. You both nod solemnly. A secret is offered next, in the form of gossip. One manuscript is rumored to contain a recipe for invisibility, but the ink vanished before anyone could read it. The scholar grins. Appropriate? No? You follow a winding stair into a tower chamber, just 1 room wide. At its top, a massive book lies open on a stone pedestal, guarded by silence. No ropes, no glass, just respect. The page shows a star chart, each constellation drawn as an animal. Lion, jackal, crocodile, snake. A note in the margin reads, when you can no longer see these, go home. As dusk creeps in, oil lamps are lit by hand. The flame is passed from wick to wick, a chain of quiet reverence. You watch as one student lights the next, whispering something under his breath that might be a prayer, or maybe just the next verse of a lesson. You return to the courtyard. The scholars are still arguing, but the tone has changed. It's slower, softer, less war, more dance. One turns to you and says, if you want to understand a city, read its disagreements. And you nod, because you do. Because they are writing this city one margin at a time, not in blood or stone, but in questions, jokes, footnotes, and answers. You step back into the lane, your sandals catching the edge of some chalk-lettered proverb. You don't read it, you don't have to. You've already started to write your own. You wander away from the scholar's quarter, your thoughts still swimming with star charts and sideways poetry. But the city isn't finished with you, yet not even close. Now it leads you somewhere older, quieter, heavier. You feel it before you see it. The sacred district. There's a different rhythm here. No shouting, no bartering. Just slow movement and the hush of reverence that feels more like air pressure than sound. Even the dust is softer here, as if it knows how to tread lightly. You follow a procession of barefoot pilgrims, some young, some ancient, some limping on sticks carved with spirals. They carry nothing but water and fragments of verse. A girl recites a line with every step. Walk low, for the earth was holy before your feet. She glances at you and nods. You try to walk lower. At the center stands the great mud mosque. It rises like a dream someone shaped with their hands, sun-dried walls smooth and curving, towers topped with bundles of sticks that look like fingers reaching upward in prayer or warning. Here's your mainstream historical fact. This city's mosque is one of the largest earthen buildings in the world, rebuilt and maintained through a centuries-old ritual known as the crepusage, where entire neighborhoods gather once a year to replaster the walls with fresh mud. It's sacred labor disguised as festival. You press your palm against the sun-warmed wall. It holds the heat like memory. You swear it hums. Inside, it's cooler, darker. Columns rise like a forest, their shadows long and ribbed. Candles float in niches. The air smells of incense, dust, and time folded in on itself. You don't speak. Nobody does. Instead, your breath matches the slow exhale of the building. A muezzin in indigo climbs a narrow stair to call the evening prayer. His voice spirals into the sky, not urgent, not loud, just inevitable. Birds stir. Even the wind seems to kneel. Quirky tidbit. It's said that one particular pillar hums at dusk, but only for those who've spoken no lies that day. You lean toward one of the columns. Nothing. Probably the roasted locust joke counted against you. You find a smaller chamber off to the side. A woman in teal arranges pages into a pattern prayers, copied by hand in different inks. She doesn't look up. "We're mapping silence," she says. It's harder than it sounds. A child nearby is practicing calligraphy. His tongue sticks out in focus. He dips a reed pen into walnut ink and drags it slowly across a scrap of leather. "My letter is too fat," he says. His teacher replies, "So were the prophets. Letters are allowed." Historians still argue whether this mosque was built atop an older, pre-Islamic temple or if it was original to the city's founding. Some claim they found fragments of other gods buried beneath the foundation. Others say that's just the ground remembering. Outside again, you hear the sounds of ablution. Water from a cistern trickles into shallow bowls. Men and women cleanse their feet, faces, arms, rituals performed with slow care. You splash your hands and feel the grit wash away. It's not just dirt that leaves. The street bends, and suddenly you're in the cemetery. No gate. Just low stones arranged like sentences in an ancient book, some tilted, others buried in grass. Names carved shallowly into mud brick markers. The air is still. Even your footsteps seem hesitant. A woman in a saffron shawl places stones on a grave and whispers something you can't catch. You don't need to. You've whispered that sort of thing too. The sun begins to bleed into the horizon. Gold slipping into red, then into a kind of purple that has no name. A bell chimes not for time, but for memory. It only rings when someone has been forgotten. You sit beneath an acacia tree and breathe it all in. The earth smells warm and old. Somewhere behind you, someone is singing low, rhythmic, like waves against a shore that isn't made of water. Another traveler joins you. He nods, but doesn't speak. After a while, he says, "When they buried the poet, they planted mint on his grave. That's how we remember by the smell." You ask which poet. He smiles. "Does it matter?" Back in the mosque shadow, a group of caretakers are lighting lamps along the outer wall. One for each pillar, each elder, each lost word. The flames are tiny, but they bloom against the mud like stars dropped from someone's sleeve. You walk the perimeter. Each step feels like a page turning in reverse. A prayer is being recited somewhere, not toward the heavens, but toward the ground. A scholar once said, "If you want to understand faith here, don't ask for definitions, ask for directions." And so, you keep walking. You pass a shrine, just a small dome painted with fading birds. Inside, a relic wrapped in silk and guarded by an old man with one tooth and a voice like gravel. "Want to see it?" he asks. You nod. He unwraps it slowly. It's a quill, blackened with use, feather frayed to a whisper. "Used by the scribe who wrote the first city charter," he says. "Or maybe it's just a chicken feather. Doesn't matter, we believe what we need." You thank him. He shrugs. "Everything writes something, even you." By nightfall, the sacred district glows gently lamps, braziers, moonlight on mud. The shadows no longer feel like absence. They feel like company. And the great mosque, it doesn't sleep, it waits, like it always has. You walk away slowly, like a guest leaving a house that's older than memory, like someone who has read a book with no end and realizes the last page isn't blank, it's a mirror. The moon has taken the city in its arms now, but you stubborn, restless air, still moving. The sacred hush has faded into something more mischievous. You start to notice the flicker of shadow puppets dancing on a wall, laughter filtering through a cracked wooden shutter, the spicy, forbidden scent of something cooking long past dinner. Welcome to the nighttime quarter. It's the city's exhale. This is where the rules stretch a little, where stories are told not to teach, but to tease. You duck beneath a woven awning into a courtyard lit by fire pots. A storyteller sits cross-legged in the center, wrapped in a faded indigo shawl. Around him, children and elders alike hang on his every word. He's spinning a tale about a woman who swallowed the moon and burped out stars. A girl next to you whispers, "This is the short version." Mainstream historical fact. Long after dusk, this city came alive with oral tradition. Families gathered in open-air courtyards to tell story epics of ancestors, fables wrapped in moral riddles, or verses passed down for centuries. These were not just tales. They were memory armor, worn by people whose histories weren't always welcome on parchment. A boy volunteers to tell the next tale. He's tiny, maybe 6, and already commanding the crowd like a merchant at market. His story features a clever hyena who fakes death to rob a palace. Half the audience is weeping from laughter, you included. Quirky tidbit. In some households, the youngest child isn't allowed to speak during story hour unless they've brought a riddle. One toddler, legend says, confused the entire neighborhood for a week with, "What sleeps under your nose but bites like the sun?" The answer turned out to be, "Your secrets." But it cost 3 bets and 1 chicken to figure it out. From the courtyard, you drift toward the sound of drum slow and steady, like a heart beating underwater. A celebration is underway. No one says what it's for. Doesn't matter. It might be a wedding, a birth, or just someone surviving another day. Women twirl in copper-colored robes, henna'd hands catching the lamplight. Men clap in rhythm, shoulders shaking in that effortless ancient way. The music coils around your ribs and tugs you in. Someone grabs your hand. You dance. Not well, but with enough honesty to be forgiven. Later, you find yourself sharing a roasted yam with a boy who insists his great-great-grandfather could speak to camels. But only sarcastically, he adds. You believe him. The night here is not quiet. It is curious. Behind every curtain, something breathes. Laughter, music, the slow scratch of a reed pen, a whispered secret. Even the stars above seem nosy. You pass a man tuning a stringed instrument under a fig tree. He's singing a verse so soft it almost dissolves. If I am lost, fold me into a song and carry me home. Historians still argue whether the city's night culture was part of its formal society or something subversive, women hosting secret poetry salons, performers blending satire with sermon. Some claim the night belonged to the poor, where hierarchy slipped a little and truth wore fewer clothes. Others insist it was simply the city's second fascia reflection, not a rebellion. In a back alley, you stumble on a puppet show. Tiny figures carved from leather and held against a glowing screen. The story? A crocodile who wants to become a scholar but keeps eating the library. Children squeal. An elder mutters, I once knew that crocodile. A dog wanders by and lies down beside you. He smells like spice and rain, doesn't beg, just watches the show like an old fan. A vendor pushes a cart nearby. Clay cups stacked neatly, steam curling from a bubbling pot. He ladles a thick, spicy drink into a cup and hands it to you without asking. It tastes like memory and firewood. For staying awake, he says, or dreaming smarter. Further on, you come across a narrow bridge. Below it, a stream whispers along, silver in the moonlight. A couple sits there, legs dangling, trading verses back and forth like coins. You catch a line. When you die, don't bury me. Fold me into the city's shadow and let me listen. You don't interrupt. Instead, you make your way toward an old rooftop where youths gather to swap impossible dares. I climbed the western gate barefoot. I kissed a girl from the sacred quarter. I stole a mango from the imam's garden and lived. You sit. They accept you with a glance. From this height, the whole city glows, not just the lamps, but the rooftops, the courtyards, even the silence between buildings sits all lit with a kind of soft confidence, as if the city knows it survived things too old to name. And you know what's odd? You don't feel like an outsider anymore. Not quite. Maybe it's the tea, or the dance, or the fact that you laughed with a stranger about a sarcastic camel. But the city is no longer a puzzle. It's a song with too many verses to memorize, but a chorus you've started to hum without thinking. Someone on the rooftop shouts, "Tell us a story!" And the youngest of the group begins. Not with "once upon a time," but with "so there was this person who arrived one morning, dusty and lost." You blink. They're telling your story now. And somehow, it fits. By the time dawn begins to creep its way across the horizon, soft, pale, and yawning, the rooftop crowd has thinned. Some sleep in bundles of woven cloth. Others have slinked off toward whatever hammocks or floor mats they call home. You sit still, watching the night slip behind the mud towers like a cat that's overstayed curfew. The city stretches, not metaphorically, literally. As the sun peeks out, buildings seem to lean a little taller, shadows pull back like covers, and narrow alleys glow with a kind of sleepy gold. Morning here is not a jolt. It's a sigh. You descend from the rooftop, and start walking again, toward the outer ring of the city, the place where clay gives way to clay brick, then reed fencing, and finally, to open scrubland, dotted with baobab trees like punctuation marks in the dirt. This is where the city Enzor pretends to. Out here, in the soft blue of early morning, you find the caravanserai. Mainstream historical fact. These fortified roadside inns were the lifeblood of trans-Saharan trade, linking distant cities like arteries. They offered shelter not just for merchants, but for their camels, goods, and all the rumors they carried. A city like this would have had one, maybe several at its perimeter. The one you find is half ruin, half bustle. Stone arches still hold together, barely. Inside, there's a flurry of activity. Hooves thumping against packed dirt. Traders shouting in at least 4 languages. A goat stubbornly trying to eat someone's ledger. A boy with a sun-bleached turban offers to sell you a story, a salt crystal, or a slightly cursed necklace, your choice. You go with the salt crystal. Wise, he nods. Necklace whispers insults. You spot bundles of cowrie shells, bolts of indigo-dyed cotton, dried cola nuts, and strange roots that look like gnarled toes. Everything smells like spice and iron. A merchant from the north unrolls maps made from bark. A traveler from the coast offers gold dust sealed in tiny gourds. A woman from the east is selling ostrich eggs hollowed out and painted with constellations. Someone drops a jar of gum Arabic and curses in an accent thick with sand and distance. It's a market of chaos, sure, but also of friction, the good kind, the kind that makes fire. A local man, teeth stained with cola, invites you to sit. This city, he says, is made of more than mud. It's made of arrival. He offers you tea brewed in a dented copper kettle, sweet enough to trigger past life memories. You sip and listen. He tells you the city's founding wasn't marked by war or kingship, but by agreement. The first walls were raised only after 6 tribes came together under a tamarind tree and agreed to speak in whispers for 3 days to test if peace would hold. On the 4th day, he says, someone coughed, and they laughed, and that's how it began. Quirky tidbit, there's a local belief that if you trade 3 things with 3 strangers before breakfast, you'll never go hungry again. You swap a button for a date, a story for a carved bead, and a smirk for a riddle. That last trade feels the most valuable. Historians still argue whether this city's trade dominance truly rivaled that of medieval London. Some point to ancient tax ledgers inscribed with wax seals. Others claim it was inflated by poetic exaggeration merchants, boasting of cities where the walls sweated perfume and you could buy silk with a song. But no one denies the reach of this place. Its name appeared on maps drawn by men who had never left their islands. Back at the caravanserai, a new caravan arrives. Dozens of camels sway in like ships coming into port. Their hooves raise soft clouds. Their backs are loaded with bundles wrapped in goat hide, tied with sinew and red string. Their eyes are long-lashed, bored, and vaguely judgmental. Their drivers wear robes the color of sunrise and dust. One of them carries a lute carved from acacia wood. As he walks, he strums it absently, and you recognize the melody from the night before. It's followed you. You trail them back through the gate, into the city again. This time, it feels different. You're no longer a visitor. You're an ingredient, a single grain in the great mortar of things. You pass by familiar alleys, now vendors from yesterday's market reassembling their stalls, children sweeping stoops with bunches of grass, an old woman sprinkling water on the doorstep and muttering a blessing made of vowels. The mosque looms again, soft and golden in the morning haze. A group of volunteers is already clambering up the sides, slathering the walls with fresh clay as part of the annual renewal. You watch for a while. One of them tosses you a lump of mud. Help? or walk. He grins. You help. You smear the wall with the rich, wet clay. It's strangely satisfying. Each stroke leaves a mark, then vanishes into the hole. It feels like writing without words. Your hands are filthy. You smile anyway. Afterward, someone hands you a strip of dried mango and a cloth to wipe off the mud. You're part of it now, they say. Congratulations, no refunds. You find yourself drifting toward the edge of the sacred district again. The bells begin to ring softly this time, like someone stirring sugar into sound. You pause beneath a tree just beginning to bloom. Its flowers are a brilliant red, almost comically bright against the dust. A passing child says, "That's the flame tree. It only blooms when someone new understands." You ask, "Understands what?" She shrugs. "The city." Then she runs off, leaving you with a flower that probably means nothing or everything. Depends how long you stay. The morning has softened into a dusty gold, and your legs take you back into the folds of the city like you've lived here for years. You've grown familiar with the layout, its winding arteries and secret capillaries. This is no grid, no conqueror's geometry. It's a pattern grown from memory and mistake. You head toward the scholarly district, because yes, the city of mud had one. No ivory towers, but plenty of wisdom. Mainstream historical fact. In its prime, this city was home to sprawling manuscript libraries, thousands of texts copied by hand, traded across deserts, and studied in quiet rooms with oil, lamps, and reed pens. Astronomy, law, poetry, medicine, there was no shortage of knowledge inked into these pages. You turn down a narrow corridor lined with wooden doors, each marked by a symbol. A bird, a crescent, a pair of open eyes. Behind one of these doors lies a scriptorium. You duck inside. The air smells like parchment, nut oil, and old ink. A dozen scribes sit at low tables, transcribing texts with the kind of precision usually reserved for surgeons or sculptors. A young woman lifts her head and beckons you in. "Read or copy?" she says. You admit to being better at reading, she snorts. "Then you'll do both." She leads you to a cushion beside a cracked, leather-bound volume. The script is flowing, decorative, and dense. Beside it, a translation guide, not quite one-to-one. She tells you to follow the words with your finger. You trace phrases that describe stars and seasons, treatises on balance, remedies involving rosewater and crushed beetle shells, poems about rivers that vanish in the sun. Quirky tidbit, in one corner of the manuscript, someone has doodled a donkey in a turban. Next to it, the note, "He refused to recite the proverb." The scribe beside you snickers. A small boy brings mint water. Another offers a smear of gum arabic to fix a crumbling page. Everyone's hands are stained. Everyone's backs are slightly hunched, but their eyes are bright, alive. They are midwifing knowledge, bringing old words into new mouths. Historians still argue whether the manuscripts here were original or merely copied works from earlier Arab and Persian traditions. But most agree that many texts carried unique commentary, regional insight, and footnotes more poetic than technical. Some margins contained folk remedies that aren't found anywhere else, wisdom passed down by women, healers, or that one uncle everyone listens to but no one trusts with a goat. A scholar shows you a weathered page with diagrams of planetary movements drawn in ochre and outlined in soot. He points to a note that says, "Stars do not rule men, but they do whisper." You nod like you understand. He seems satisfied. Outside the scriptorium, you hear the voice of a street poet chanting verses in the midday sun. Ink is patient, but memory is a thief. Write faster, or lose what your grandmother told you. You follow the sound to a shaded courtyard, where a group gathers around a man draped in a robe so patched it resembles a mosaic. He speaks in rhythm, words tumbling like beads from a snapped necklace. The crowd answers back, some with claps, some with verses of their own. It's part rap battle, part sermon, part therapy. Someone shouts, "Tell the one about the blind camel and the stolen bride." Without missing a beat, the poet begins. It's ridiculous. It's beautiful. You're almost crying with laughter by the end. And just like that, the performance dissolves. No encore, no merch table. Just a quiet nod, a shared smile, and the rustle of people returning to whatever life had briefly paused. You drift toward one of the public wells. People gather not just to draw water, but to gossip, trade remedies, whisper jokes. A girl drops her bucket and a stranger catches it mid-fall without spilling a drop. Applause breaks out. She bows like a stage magician. The water is cool, sweet. Someone's added a sprig of mint to the communal ladle. Every great city, a man says, needs 3 things: stories, water, and people nosy enough to ask questions. He toasts the air with his ladle. You keep walking. Every step now feels like retracing a memory you didn't know you had. The market paths, the mosque's quiet shadow, even the thrum of distant music, it's all part of some soft loop. A woman in a doorway beckons. "You look like someone who's forgotten how to rest," she says. You shrug. She nods. "Come in then." Her home is simple. Clay walls, woven mats, shelves lined with herbs and bowls. She crushes dried leaves between her palms and tosses them into a pot. The scent is sharp mint, pepper, something else. She pours the steaming mixture into 2 cups and hands you one. "No charge," she says. "But you must answer this riddle. What has no legs but never stays still, and no mouth but makes everything taste like home?" You sip the tea, smile. "A story." She winks. "Good enough." You leave her doorway just as the shadows begin to lengthen. It's not quite evening, but the city has shifted again. Voices quiet, steps slow. Light takes on a bronze quality, like everything has been brushed with warmth. In a courtyard, a group of children plays a game involving flat stones and shouted lies about each other's uncles. A goat ambles through, uninvited but tolerated. You watch until the sun dips below the rim of the tallest wall, and then you walk again toward the memory of a roof, a flame tree, and the sound of someone saying your name in a story. Evening in the city arrives like a story you've already heard, just enough changes to keep you listening. You climb the familiar staircase back to the rooftop where this whole thing began. The same rooftop where you squinted into dusk, unsure what kind of place you'd stumbled into. But now, you know the rhythm. The city has its own breath. Inhale with sunrise, exhale by starlight. A few figures are already there, older folks with soft hands and sharper eyes. They nod at you in that quiet way people do when they've accepted your presence. No big welcome, just space made. Below, the city hushes. Fires flicker in clay stoves. Doors creak open and shut like pages being turned. And then there it is, again a faint melody drifting up on the breeze. That same song, played from somewhere in the alleys. Untraceable. It loops without looping, like breath. One of the rooftop elders leans over. "That tune," she says, "it's older than our walls, maybe older than the river." Mainstream historical fact. Oral traditions in West African cities were not just entertainment, they were repositories of law, history, and philosophy. Griots, the traveling bards and memory keepers, could recite dozens of generations of lineage and settle disputes with nothing more than a song. You imagine the tune curling through generations, growing moss in its quiet corners, a melody that remembers. The stars begin to prick through the sky. They are different Hireno's city, glare to drown them. The constellations feel closer, more nosy. You pick out Orion, lazily lying on his side, and a few shapes you don't recognize. Someone whispers the local names. The talking goat, the wounded drum, the eyes of last night. Down below, the mosque hums with evening prayer. It's not loud, more like a heartbeat, consistent and gentle. The minaret gleams faintly, still smeared with that fresh coat of clay you helped apply. You feel a little pride. That lump of mud was yours. Quirky tidbit. It's said that the city's outer walls are mixed with powdered baobab bark to deter termites and attract blessings. Whether true or not, the walls do seem to glow slightly in moonlight as though storing up secrets. You slip down the rooftop steps again, not ready for sleep. You wander. At this hour, the city isn't empty, it's whispering. Conversations lean close, voices drop to hushed tones. There's laughter tucked into courtyards, the clink of bowls being washed, and somewhere, always, a drum keeping time for no one in particular. In a shaded alley, you find an old man painting a doorway. Not decorating, repairing. The paint is a deep indigo, his brush made from goat hair tied with twine. He doesn't look up, just says, "Blue tells the night to be gentle." You nod like that makes sense. It kind of does. He dips the brush again. You still think this place is made of mud? You hesitate, then shake your head. Good, he mutters. Means you've been listening. You wander further and find yourself at a public square, smaller than the main market, but still buzzing. A pot bubbles in the center, tended by a woman with arms like folded rope and a grin that could part clouds. She offers you a bowl of tiguarej na spicy peanut stew, thick with vegetables and fire. Eat slow, she warns. Dreams run faster after this. You thank her, sit on a low bench, and eat. It's spicy. It's perfect. You wonder if you'll ever be able to eat something this warm, this alive, back home. Across the square, someone is carving wood by lantern light. Tiny figurines, animals, dancers, even a grumpy-looking griot in mid-recitation. You buy one shaped like the mosque. He adds a tiny clay hat. Now it looks like you. As you tuck it away, a young couple walks past humming. She's carrying a bundle of dried herbs. They lean into each other, laughing at nothing in particular. You realize you haven't thought about your phone in hours, or your inbox, or the news. The world feels narrowed down to this gentle, gold-tinted city that once rivaled Empire Sand in its own way, maybe still does. Historians still argue whether the city ever truly fell. Some say it declined with the collapse of the trade routes. Others blame colonial pressures, climate shifts, or politics. But walk these alleys, taste this stew, touch these walls, and you'll start to suspect quietly, firmly, that nothing has fallen, only hidden. You make your way back to the edge of the sacred district. A storyteller has gathered a small crowd around a fire made from camel thorn wood. He holds a staff carved with suns and moons and speaks in low, rolling tones. He tells of a lizard who outran time, of a tower that sang when it rained, and of a traveler who arrived with nothing but a question and left with a name not his own. When the story ends, the crowd sits in silence for a beat too long. Then, without cue, they all rise. Some leave a coin, one leaves a kiss on the staff. You ask him if the stories are true. He smiles. Which part? The lizard. Definitely not. The singing tower? A little. The traveler? He leans forward. You're holding the ending to that one. You look at your hands. They're empty, but only literally. Back on your rooftop, the night finally deepens into velvet. You lie back, head on your folded cloak, eyes on the sky. The wind smells like clay and roasted peanuts, ink and salt, and something you can't name. You're not asleep yet, but your thoughts start to drift, not away from the city, but deeper into it. And the tune drifts up again, this time closer. It ends not with a flourish, but with a sigh. The stars blink once, and the city holds you. You wake just before dawn, still on the rooftop, limbs a little stiff, face kissed by the cool desert breeze. The city is hushed, as if holding its breath. It's that magic hour when even time seems to pause, unsure whether to keep going or curl up for a little longer. You stretch quietly. The others on the rooftop are bundled under cloths and shawls, soft bundles in the morning gray. You're not ready to leave, but something in the air tells you it's time to start saying goodbye. The mosque looms in the near distance, its silhouette softened by mist. It looks less like a building now, and more like a memory caught in clay. You think of the mud you helped slap onto its walls, the ridge you built. It will dry and crack and be patched again, as it has been for centuries. Mainstream historical fact. This ritual of replastering isn't just maintenance, it's ceremony. The whole community participates. It's timed with the seasons, linked to lunar calendars, and serves as a reminder that what is sacred must also be tended, touched, and rebuilt with human hands. You make your way down to the ground level, passing doorways where early risers sweep dust from the thresholds, draw water from clay jugs, and feed little scraps to waiting goats. The city is shaking itself awake. At the square, a group of women is already sifting millet in wide, shallow baskets. The grain glints in the light, like tiny sunbeams. You watch the chaff rise, hover, then fall like whispers. The rhythm is meditative. You sit and watch, and they don't mind. One offers you a date, split and sticky. You take it. A child runs past barefoot, trailing a scarf behind her like a comet's tail. She laughs for no reason, or maybe for every reason. You walk further, past the walls you now know like a second skin. The blue door, the fig tree, the bench where you ate stew and fell a little bit in love with a city made of sun-baked earth. A narrow alley leads to the southern gate. It's smaller than the others, almost forgotten, but it's open now. You step toward it, but pause. You turn back for a moment. Because the city's quiet isn't empty, it's expectant. Quirky tidbit. Local tradition says that if you leave the city without saying farewell, your dreams will wander here without you, knocking on clay doors, sleeping on rooftops, whispering your name in alleys. And until you return, you'll always sleep a little crooked. So you do the only thing you can. You raise your hand. Not a grand wave, just a small one. A nod, a promise. A whisper rises with the wind. We'll keep your stories safe. And you step through the gate. And now, the city fades not with drama, but with grace. Like dusk slipping into night, or a candle's last flicker before sleep. The scent of clay still clings to your thoughts, warm and honest, like the hands that built everything you touched. The sounds recede too. The soft sweep of millet being sifted, the far-off drumbeat keeping time with footsteps, and the lull of that tune, that ancient, wandering melody that greeted you at dusk and tucked you in at dawn. You carry it now. Not just the melody, but the place. The dusty alleys and the honey-thick light, the crooked doors and the sudden bursting laughter. The way stories lived, not in books, but in breath. And how mud, just mud, could hold up something sacred for centuries. Let it stay with you as you drift towards sleep. Let it smooth out the jagged corners of your day. Let the memory of the fig tree's shadow, the hush of the mosque, and the soft rhythm of distant footsteps become the lullaby your body didn't know it needed. Tonight, you don't just sleep, you return. To rooftops and reed pens, to stew that tastes like fire and kindness, to a city that never really fell, just waited. Close your eyes now. Let the soft background hum take over. Let the walls breathe around you. And if you dream of narrow streets and starlit skies, walk them slowly. The city is still there, still listening